Hey everybody, this is your host Dan. Today's project is going to be replacing a set of tie rod ends on a 2007 Pontiac Grand Prix. So let's get started. Here's the rocking I'm getting on the tire, which is kind of excessive, I think. I'm surprised the car doesn't drive any worse. It drives pretty good, except when you hit some bumps you might hear a little clunk here and there. Now keep in mind you have two tie rod ends. You have an inner and an outer, so you're going to want to reach behind and grab probably the back end of the outer and figure out what's wiggling, the inner or the outer. In my case it's the outer. So I'm going to get started. We'll lower the car down and get the tire off. Now that I have the tire off, you can see the play occurring here on the outer tie rod end. I'm going to grab the brake disc and give that a little tug back and forth. You can see the steering knuckles moving, but this part is staying in place. So that's how we know that it's the outer tie rod end, not the inner. If this was moving and it was clunking at the other end, it would be the inner tie rod end. Next up, there's a nut underneath here. It's an 18 millimeter. It's a little quick shot of PB in here. It'll make your life easier instead of making it harder. Next up is to break that nut free. That's at the end here. I'm just using a second crescent wrench up at the top here, so when I turn this it locks down on the sway bar, so I'm not twisting the inner tie rod end to death when I'm trying to crack the nut. But I just want to get that nut off just a little bit. I just want to back it up just a little. I got an 8 millimeter on the bottom because it started to spin, and hopefully with the help of my 8 millimeter friend here I'll be able to get the nut all the way off. It looks like it's coming. I had to come in here and put a pair of vice grips on the top part of the stud because I couldn't get it all the way with the 8 millimeter socket. So that was just enough to clamp it to get that nut off, which was pretty rusted in place. But after a few minutes of cussing, we got it loose. Completely popped this free. Now that our tie rod is free, we're just going to count the number of turns until this comes off. That's 1, 2, 3, about 10.5 turns. Put it on straight up, about 10.5 turns, dive back down. Yep, this tie rod end, I can feel all sorts of wiggle going on here in the end. It's pretty excessive. Definitely, without a doubt, needed to be replaced. I also kind of like lining my new parts up against the old parts, just to make sure everything's similar. These look like they're the right exact length and fit and all that good stuff. So let's set the old part aside. The new part, we've got to kind of prep a little bit. We need to put the Zerk fitting in, get that started. 5/16 it takes. We got to tighten that down. And also, these tie rod ends don't have any lube in them, so I'm going to have to get out my lube gun and a little lube in them, pump them up. Now the new part, Zerk fitting installed. Put some lube in there. It's about ready to squish out. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go about that 10.5 turns. That's my half. 1, 2, 3. There we go. Here's our 10.5. That should get me real close to where I was. Lastly, I just gotta come back in and tighten up that jam nut. Okay, now let's recheck that wheel. See how good? Oh yeah, there's no movement at all. Trying to rock it side to side. it's completely gone. I'm going to let it down and we'll retorque the lugs the final last time. Passenger side is now done, same thing as the driver. Only difference on the passenger side is that the nut at the end of the stud, it froze into place. I could not get it off. I had to resort to using a hacksaw to cut it off. But replacing the tie rod ends on pretty much any car, this is the same kind of procedure will apply to a multitude of vehicles. This particular one, it passed the wiggle test. The tire didn't wiggle, but further inspection I could tell that the boot was pretty much gone, and that means all your grease is going to run out and eventually this will rust out and it won't be too far behind the other one. So that's why I replaced these as a pair. Now, it's usually best after you do something like this to take your car to an alignment shop and make sure. But I'm going to road check my car, and if it still drives straight as an arrow and doesn't pull to either side, I'm going to wait and hold off to get my next alignment when I get the next new set of tires. So that's all I got for you today. Hope you enjoyed the tips. Hope you enjoyed watching the video. And as always, thanks for watching.